My father always told me I was his greatest investment. I never realized he meant that literally until I found the credit card bills in his safe, all opened in my name the week I turned 18. I am 19 years old, and I am currently sitting in a $1 million house that feels like a tomb, shaking so hard I can barely hold my phone. 3 days ago, my life was normal. Then came the call from jail. My father did not ask if I was safe. He ordered me to sell my car, the only thing I actually own, to bail out my stepmother. He said it was my duty. He said I owed him. I almost did it. I almost sacrificed myself for them one last time. But then I found the truth hidden behind a painting of a sad clown while I was skipping meals to pay for textbooks. They were stealing my inheritance and ruining my credit to buy champagne. I made a choice that tore my family apart. I sent my own father to prison to save my future. Now, my relatives are calling me a traitor, and my little brother is asking when Daddy is coming home. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his father is not a hero, but a thief who stole his sister's life? I feel like I am drowning in guilt, even though I know I am the victim. My name is Isabella. I am 19 years old, a sophomore at the local community college in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and currently, my net worth is exactly $112.43. That is, if I do not count the impending tuition bill for the spring semester, or the fact that my shift at the diner was cut short last week because the manager decided he wanted to hire his niece instead. I am technically an adult, legally allowed to vote and sign contracts that I barely understand. But emotionally, I often feel like a child waiting for permission to exist. I live in a state of perpetual transit, shuffling between the suffocating stability of my mother's house and the chaotic, magnetic pull of a father who only remembers my existence when he needs an audience. It was the 4th Thursday in November, Thanksgiving. The air outside was biting, the kind of damp cold that seeps through your coat and settles into your bones. But inside my mother's dining room, the temperature was stiflingly warm. The room smelled of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and the cinnamon candles my mother, Sarah, insisted on burning to mask the scent of old resentments that always seemed to linger in the corners of this house. I sat at the mahogany table, tracing the floral patterns on the tablecloth with a manicured fingernail. My mother sat opposite me, her posture rigorous, her pearls gleaming under the chandelier light. She was cutting her turkey with surgical precision, the knife scraping against the fine china with a sound that made my teeth ache. Everything in this house was perfect. The napkins were folded into swans. The cranberry sauce was homemade, not the gelatinous cylinder from a can that I secretly preferred. It was a scene from a magazine, a picture of the ideal American family, minus the father. Of course, he had been gone for 7 years, replaced by a silence that my mother filled with volunteer work at the church and aggressive gardening. "You are not eating, Isabella," my mother said, not looking up from her plate. Her voice was calm, measured, the voice of a woman who had categorized all her emotions and filed them away in a locked cabinet. "I am not hungry. I lead." My stomach was actually twisting in knots, a physical manifestation of the anxiety that had been plaguing me all day. I kept glancing at my phone, which sat face down on the table next to my water glass. It was strictly against house rules to have phones at the dinner table, a rule enforced with the passive-aggressive sigh that only mothers can master. But I had kept it there anyway. I was waiting. Waiting for what? A text? A call? A sign that I mattered? David. My father had not called in 3 weeks. The last time we spoke, he had promised to send me money for new tires for my car, a beat-up sedan that I had bought with my own tips from waitressing. But the check never arrived. It never did. Yet, here I was, 19 years old, and still clinging to the pathetic hope that maybe, just maybe, he would call today to wish me a happy Thanksgiving. It was a sickness. Really, an addiction to breadcrumbs. Eat some green beans. My mother commanded gently, "You look pale. You are working too hard at that diner." I told you, I can help with your tuition if you just focus on your grades. I stabbed a green bean with my fork. We had been over this. I did not want her money. Her money came with strings attached, with expectations of law school and sensible shoes and a life that mirrored her own gray existence. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to prove to everyone, especially my father, that I could make it on my own. It was ironic, considering I was currently drowning in minor debt and driving a car that sounded like a dying lawnmower. But pride is a powerful anesthetic. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, marking the seconds of my wasted youth. Outside the window, dead leaves skittered across the driveway. It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where homeowners associations measured the height of your grass and neighbors called the police if you left your trash cans out past 6 in the evening. It was safe. It was secure. It was incredibly boring. And then the phone buzzed. It was a harsh, vibrating sound against the wood of the table, shattering the carefully constructed atmosphere of the dinner. My mother stopped chewing. Her eyes darted to the device, then to me, her expression hardening. I flipped the phone over. The screen lit up, glowing bright in the dim room. It was not a saved contact. It was not Dad. It was a generic number, followed by a location tag that made my heart hammer against my ribs. County Correctional Facility. My breath hitched. I looked at my mother. She knew. She always knew. Her face went pale, her lips pressing into a thin line of disapproval. "Do not answer that, Isabella," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the green button. Logic told me she was right. Nothing good ever came from a call like this, especially not on a holiday. But then I thought of him, my dad. The man who used to carry me on his shoulders, who bought me ice cream for dinner, who made life feel like a Technicolor movie instead of a black and white documentary. If he was calling from there, something was terribly wrong. I slid my thumb across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. A robotic, pre-recorded female voice filled my ear. Cold and indifferent. "You have a collect call from an inmate at the county jail. To accept the charges, press 1. I pressed 1 without thinking. The line clicked. There was a burst of static, and then I heard the background noise of a chaotic, echoing room. Men shouting, heavy doors slamming, and then his voice. "Bella, is that you?" It was him. David, but his voice was different. It lacked its usual bravado, its smooth, salesman charm. He sounded frantic, breathless, like a man drowning. "Daddy," I said, slipping instantly back into the role of the terrified little girl. "What happened? Where are you? Listen to me. Honey, I do not have much time." He rushed out, the words tumbling over each other. "It is all a mistake, a huge misunderstanding. The cops, they, 小雨静号令, 2# is greater than they have it out for me. Bella, you know how it is. They pulled me over, said I had some unpaid tickets, some nonsense about a warrant. They dragged me in here on Thanksgiving. Can you believe that? He was lying. I knew he was lying. You do not get thrown in county jail on a holiday for unpaid parking tickets. But I pushed the doubt down, burying it under layers of concern. Are you okay? I asked. I am fine. I can handle this, he said, dismissive of his own predicament. But Bella, you have to listen. It is not about me. It is Karen. They took Karen too. Karen, my stepmother, the woman who smiled with too many teeth and always smelled of expensive perfume that failed to mask the scent of stale wine. I felt a flicker of annoyance. I did not care about Karen. Okay, Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than I said, slowly. But the kids... Bella, David's voice cracked, rising an octave. Leo and Mia, they are at the house alone. The police, they called Child Protective Services. They said if no one claims them within 2 hours, they are coming to take them. They are going to put them in the system. Bella, foster care. You know what happens to kids in foster care? They get abused. They get lost. They get separated. The room seemed to spin. Leo was 5. Mia was 7. My half-siblings. Innocent, wide-eyed children who had done nothing to deserve the chaos their parents created. I pictured Mia, with her pigtails and her missing front tooth, sitting in that big, empty house, waiting for a mommy and daddy who were not coming home. Oh my God, I gasped. You have to go get them. David pleaded. You are the only one. Bella, you are their big sister. If you do not go right now, it is on you. Do you hear me? If they take those kids away, it is your fault. I cannot do anything from in here. You have to save them. The guilt hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. It was a weapon my father wielded with expert precision. It is your fault. He had been saying variations of that phrase to me my whole life. If he missed my birthday, it was because I was too demanding. If he lost a job, it was because the child support payments for me were too high. I will go, I said, my voice trembling. I am leaving right now. Good girl, he said, the relief audible in his voice. You are my angel. Bella, my savior. Go to the house. Get the kids. And Bella, bring your checkbook. We might need to figure out bail later. But get the kids first. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. The silence in the dining room was deafening. My mother was staring at me, her knife and fork resting on the edge of her plate. She had not eaten a bite. He is in jail, is he not? She asked. It was not a question. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. I have to go. Mom, Isabella, sit down, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. I cannot. He, Sao Yu Jing Haoling. 2 hashes greater than he and Karen got arrested. The kids are alone at the house. Child Protective Services is on the way. I have to get Leo and Mia. My mother stood up too, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She walked around the table and grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. Desperate. Do not do this, she said. This is what he does. He creates a crisis, and then he drags you into it to clean up his mess. Those children are not your responsibility. Call the police back. Tell them to call Karen's mother. Tell them to call anyone else. They are my brother and sister, I shouted, pulling my arm away. I was surprised by the volume of my own voice. You want me to let them go to a foster home? You want them to be strangers to me? I want you to protect yourself My mother yelled back, her composure finally cracking. He is using you. Isabella, he has been using you since the day you were born to get to me, to get to my money. And now he is using you for whatever sick game he is playing. Look at you. You are shaking. I am shaking because I am scared for them, I retorted, grabbing my purse from the sideboard. I headed for the door, my heart pounding in my throat. I felt like I was tearing myself in two. Part of me, the rational part that sounded like my mother, knew she was right. This was a trap. This was drama. This was toxic. But the other part, the part that still desperately wanted my father to love me, was already halfway out the door. Isabella, my mother called after me, her voice breaking. If you walk out that door, do not come back tonight crying when he hurts you, because he will. He always does. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. The heavy oak door felt cold under my palm. I looked back at her. She looked small, standing there in the hallway, surrounded by her perfect decorations and her lonely life. I have to. Mom, I whispered. I opened the door and stepped out into the night. The wind hit me instantly, biting and cruel. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old silver sedan with a dent in the rear bumper and a heater that only worked on the highest setting. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the door. As I slid into the driver's seat, the smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener filled my nose. It was not a luxury vehicle, but it was mine. It was the only thing I owned outright. I jammed the key into the ignition and the engine sputtered to life with a reluctant cough. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the warm glow of my mother's house behind. I was driving toward the wealthy side of town, toward the gated community where my father lived a life he could not afford, toward 2 terrified children and a destiny I was not prepared for. The road ahead was dark, illuminated only by the weak beams of my headlights. I turned on the radio to drown out the silence, but I did not hear the music. All I could hear was my father's voice echoing in my head. Bring your checkbook. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I told myself I was a hero. I told myself I was saving my family, but deep down, in the quietest part of my mind, a nasty little voice whispered the truth. You are not the hero. You are the prey. The drive to my father's house took 40 minutes, but it felt like 40 years. The transition from the modest, working-class neighborhood where my mother lived to the manicured, sterile perfection of the Oaks was jarring. This was where the people who wanted to pretend they had made it resided. The gates were wrought iron, towering and imposing, designed to keep the riffraff out. I punched in the code at the call box. My birthday, 4 digits that David used for everything. A lazy attempt at sentimentality that doubled as a security risk. The heavy gate swung open with a slow, mechanical groan, granting me access to the sanctuary of the elite. I navigated the winding streets lined with identical McMansions. Each house was a beige or gray monument to excess, with 3-car garages and lawns that looked like they had been painted green. My silver sedan, with its rattling muffler and peeling clear coat, was an intruder here. I could feel the invisible eyes of the neighborhood watch burning into my neck as I rolled past. When I pulled into my father's driveway, the house was dark. It was a sprawling structure with faux stone turrets and oversized windows, looking for all the world like a castle made of stucco. But as I killed the engine and the headlights died, the illusion of grandeur began to crack. There were trash cans left out by the curb, overflowing with bags that had been torn open, likely by raccoons. A shredded Amazon box lay soggy in the middle of the walkway. A lease notice was stuck to the front door, fluttering pathetically in the wind. I stepped out of the car, and the silence of the neighborhood pressed in on me. It was too quiet. No dog barked. No television flickered in the windows. It was the silence of a tomb. I still had my key. I had not used it in 6 months. Not since the last time Karen had accused me of stealing her face cream. A ridiculous allegation that had ended with me storming out and vowing never to return. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. The moment I pushed the door open, the smell hit me. It was a thick, cloying cocktail of expensive lilies, stale cigarette smoke, and something sour, like milk that had been left out in the sun. I gagged, covering my nose with the sleeve of my sweater. This was not the smell of a home. It was the smell of neglect masked by air freshener. "Hello?" I called out. "Leo? Mia?" My voice echoed in the high-ceilinged foyer. No answer. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The electricity must have been cut, or maybe just a bulb had burned out and no one had bothered to replace it. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom like a knife. The house was a disaster. From the outside, it looked like $1 million. Inside, it looked like a fraternity house after a particularly destructive party. I stepped over a pile of mail that had been shoved through the slot and left to rot on the floor. I shone the light into the living room. The white leather sectional, which Karen had once bragged cost $10,000, was stained with dark blotches of what I hoped was red wine. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Designer jackets, silk scarves, a single high-heeled shoe resting on the mantelpiece. I walked toward the kitchen, my boots crunching on something gritty. Spilled sugar, perhaps, or cat litter. We did not own a cat. The kitchen was worse. Dirty dishes were stacked precariously in the sink. A tower of ceramic and grease. A half-eaten rotisserie chicken sat on the granite island, picked clean by human fingers, surrounded by empty bottles of premium vodka and scotch. This was how they lived. They drank $300 champagne out of dirty glasses while the power company sent final notices. I moved the beam of my flashlight across the stainless steel refrigerator. It was covered in drawings. Mia's stick figures of a happy family holding hands. Leo's attempts at writing his name in crayon. And right in the center, holding up a drawing of a rainbow, was a magnet that made my blood run cold. It was a business card, laminated and bright yellow. Al's bail bonds. Open 24/7. We get you out fast. It was not just a card. It was a magnet, a permanent fixture. You do not put a bail bondsman's number on your fridge unless you expect to use it. You do not keep it next to your children's artwork unless the line between criminal chaos and domestic life has been completely erased. I stared at it, feeling a wave of nausea. How many times had this happened before? How many times had David or Karen been dragged away in cuffs while I was sitting in chemistry class? Completely unaware, a sudden thump from upstairs broke my trance. "Leo? Mia? Is that you?" I shouted, spinning around. I ran for the stairs, the beam of my light bouncing wildly against the walls. The carpet on the stairs was thick and plush, but I could feel the sticky residue of spilled soda under my feet. I reached the second-floor landing. The doors to the bedrooms were all closed. I ran to the room my brother and sister shared. "Leo, Mia." I threw the door open. The room was empty. The beds were unmade, the sheets tangled, toys were scattered across the floor, Legos and dolls creating a minefield in the dark. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. Where were they? Then I heard a small whimper. It came from the master bedroom at the end of the hall. I rushed toward my father's room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The smell of stale alcohol was stronger here, mixed with Karen's overpowering perfume. The king-sized bed was a wreck of pillows and duvets. I scanned the room. Nothing. Then I saw the closet door. It was closed, but a small sliver of light from a street lamp outside illuminated the handle. I walked over slowly and turned the knob. Inside the massive walk-in closet, nestled between rows of David's Italian suits and Karen's fur coats, were two small figures huddled together on the floor. Leo and Mia looked up, their eyes wide and terrified in the beam of my flashlight. Mia was holding Leo, her arms wrapped protectively around her little brother. They were still in their pajamas, even though it was 7 in the evening. "Bella?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh, thank God." I dropped to my knees, dropping the flashlight on the carpet, and pulled them both into a crushing hug. I buried my face in Mia's hair, smelling baby shampoo and fear. "Are you guys okay? Did anyone hurt you?" "Daddy and Mommy were yelling," Leo said, his voice muffled against my coat. "Then the police came. They were really loud. Mommy screamed a lot." "It is okay," I soothed, rubbing his back. "I am here now. I am going to take you to Grandma Sarah's house. We are going to have hot cocoa. Okay? Are you going to take us to the bad place?" Mia asked, pulling back to look at me. The policeman said if nobody came, we had to go to the bad place. "No," I said fiercely, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "Never. I promise." My eyes adjusted to the dim light of the closet. We were surrounded by excess. Karen had at least 50 pairs of shoes lined up on the shelves. David had a rack of ties that probably cost more than my car. It was sickening. They had all this, yet their children were hiding in a closet, starving and terrified. "I need to get your shoes," I told them. "Stay here for 1 second." I stood up and turned back toward the bedroom to find their shoes, or coats, or anything to bundle them up against the cold. As I swept the flashlight beam across the room again, it caught a glint of gold on the dresser. I froze. There, sitting amidst a pile of coins, receipts, and a half-empty pack of cigarettes, was my father's watch, the Rolex Day-Date, solid 18-karat gold. I knew that watch. He had bought it 3 years ago to celebrate a business deal that I was pretty sure was a pyramid scheme. He had bragged about it for months. "It is an investment, Bella," he had told me when I asked why he could not help me with my braces. "This watch appreciates in value. Your teeth are just a sunken cost." I walked over to the dresser. The watch was heavy, substantial. I picked it up. The metal was cold against my palm. $50,000. That is what he said it was worth. My mind flashed to the tuition bill sitting on my desk at home. $3,000. I flashed to the tires on my car, bald and dangerous. $400. I flashed to the fact that I had been eating instant noodles for 2 weeks because I was saving up for a textbook. He owed me. The thought rose up from the dark depths of my mind, unbidden but powerful. He owed me for the missed birthdays. He owed me for the child support he never paid. He owed me for the therapy I would probably need for the rest of my life. And he had just demanded I bring my checkbook to bail him out. My hand closed around the watch. It was a reflex, a spasm of resentment. I was not a thief. I was a good student. I was a responsible daughter. But in that moment, standing in that reeking bedroom of the man who had failed me 1,000 times, the lines of morality blurred. Consider it a down payment. A voice in my head whispered, "He will never miss it. He will think the cops took it, or he lost it in the struggle." I slipped the watch into the deep pocket of my coat. It felt like a stone, weighing me down, but it also felt like justice. A small, twisted form of justice. I turned back to the closet, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought the kids might hear it. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding strained to my own ears. "Let us go. Grab your coats." Mia and Leo scrambled out of the closet, clutching their favorite stuffed animals. I herded them out of the room, careful not to look back at the dresser. I did not want to see the empty space where the watch had been. I did not want to think about what I had just done. We walked down the stairs, the house silent and judging around us. I ushered them out the front door and into the cold night air. The wind had picked up, howling through the manicured trees of the oaks. "Buckle up," I told them as they climbed into the back seat of my car. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. As we drove away, leaving the dark mansion behind, I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the watch. I felt a surge of adrenaline, followed immediately by a wave of nausea. I had crossed a line. I knew it. But as I looked in the rearview mirror at my brother and sister, huddled together in the back seat, I told myself I did what I had to do. I was the adult now. I was the provider. And if my father was going to treat us like assets to be liquidated, maybe it was time I started liquidating him. "We are going to see Daddy now?" Leo asked from the back. "Yes, Leo," I said, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. "But first, we have to go to the bank." I lead. We were not going to the bank. I had no money in the bank, but I had $50,000 in gold in my pocket. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I held a card in this twisted game my father was playing. I just did not know yet that the game was rigged, and I had just played right into his hand. I drove back to my mother's neighborhood in a daze, the street lights blurring into streaks of amber against the windshield. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thumping of the tires against the asphalt and the soft, ragged breathing of my brother and sister in the back seat. They had fallen asleep, exhausted by the trauma of the evening, their small hands still clutching the seatbelts as if holding on to a lifeline. I could not take them to the jail. A county detention center was no place for children, especially not at 8 o'clock on a Thanksgiving night. I pulled up to the curb in front of the house next door to my mother's. It belonged to Mrs. Higgins, a widow with a heart of gold and a pantry always stocked with snickerdoodles. She was the grandmother figure I had relied on after my own grandmother passed away 3 months ago. I knocked softly on her door, praying she was still awake. When the porch light flickered on and she opened the door, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her frail frame, I nearly wept with relief. "Isabella?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern as she took in my disheveled appearance. "I need a favor," I whispered, my voice cracking. "A huge favor." 10 minutes later, Leo and Mia were tucked onto Mrs. Higgins' floral sofa with warm blankets and mugs of hot chocolate. I told them I had to go help Daddy with some paperwork and that I would be back before they finished their cartoons. Lying to them tasted like ash in my mouth. But the truth, that their father was sitting in a concrete cell waiting for a payout, was too bitter for them to swallow. I got back into my car and drove. The county jail was located in the industrial district, a stark, gray complex surrounded by chain link fences, topped with razor wire that glistened menacingly under the floodlights. It looked like a factory designed to process human misery. My stomach churned as I parked the car in the visitor lot. It was almost empty, save for a few rusted trucks and a lone police cruiser. I walked toward the entrance, my hand instinctively brushing the pocket of my coat where the heavy gold Rolex lay hidden. It thumped against my hip with every step, a secret heartbeat, a physical reminder of the line I had crossed. I felt like an imposter. I felt like a criminal walking into a den of law enforcement. Inside, the air smelled of floor wax and industrial disinfectant, a chemical attempt to mask the underlying scent of unwashed bodies in despair. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor over everything. I approached the glass partition where a correctional officer, a woman with tired eyes and a uniform that looked 2 sizes too tight, sat behind a computer screen. "I am here to see David, Soyuting Haling. 2# is greater than I began." My voice trembling. I gave her his last name and date of birth. She typed slowly, her acrylic nails clicking against the keys like hail on a tin roof. "You are his daughter?" "Yes," I said. "Booth 4, she said without looking up. "You have 15 minutes. No physical contact. No passing of items. Keep your hands visible at all times." I walked through the heavy metal detector, wincing as it buzzed, though I knew it was just my belt buckle. The guard waved a wand over me, his expression bored. I held my breath, terrified he would feel the watch in my pocket, but he only patted down my sides and waved me through. The visiting room was a long, narrow corridor lined with booths. On one side, plastic chairs bolted to the floor. On the other, reinforced plexiglass separating the free from the incarcerated. I sat down at booth 4. The plastic was scratched and clouded, a foggy window into a world I never wanted to know. I waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rehearsed what I would say. "I have the kids. They are safe. What happened? Why did you do this?" Then, the heavy steel door on the other side of the glass buzzed and clicked open. David walked in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame, stripping him of the tailored elegance he prided himself on. His hair, usually gelled and coiffed to perfection, was messy and flat. He looked smaller, older, but as he sat down and picked up the black telephone receiver, his eyes locked onto mine, and I saw the familiar spark of arrogance that no prison uniform could extinguish. I picked up the phone on my side. The plastic felt greasy against my ear. "Daddy?" I whispered. He did not smile. He did not ask about Leo. He did not ask about Mia. He did not ask if I had arrived safely or if I was scared. "Did you bring it?" he asked. His voice was tinny through the receiver, but the urgency was clear. "Bring what?" I asked, confused. "The kids? They are safe. I left them with Soyuting Haoling, R. Jingho Dayu. Forget the kids." "Isabella," he snapped, cutting me off. "The credit card, the checkbook. Did you bring your checkbook like I told you?" I stared at him, stunned. The concern I had been nursing, the fear for his safety, the desperate need to comfort him. It all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold, a sharp shard of reality. "I, Soyuting Haoling, 2# is greater than I brought my checkbook." I stammered. "But Daddy, the bail. Soyuting Haoling, 2# is greater than I looked it up on the way here. For the charges, Soyuting Haoling, 2# is greater than fraud and resisting arrest. Soyuting Haoling, 2# is greater than it is thousands of dollars. I have $100 in my account. David leaned forward, his breath fogging up the glass. His eyes were intense. And Nick, I know you do not have it in your checking account. Bella, I am not stupid. I am talking about the fund. The fund. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. Grandma's fund? I asked, my voice barely audible. My grandmother, his mother, had left me a college trust fund, $50,000. It was the only money I had in the world, locked away in an account I was not supposed to touch until I graduated, or for educational emergencies. It was my future. It was my law school tuition. It was my escape plan. Yes, Grandma's fund. He said, looking around nervously as if the guards were listening to his financial planning. You have access to it now. You turned 18 last year. You can withdraw it, but Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than that is for school. I said, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. Grandma said, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, R. Jing Hao Da Yu. Grandma is dead, he shouted. The sound of his voice, booming through the receiver, made me flinch. On the other side of the glass, a guard looked over, but did not move. David lowered his voice, struggling to regain his composure. He put on the mask, the face of the loving, misunderstood father. Look, Bella, honey, listen to me. This is life or death. Do you understand? I cannot stay in here. If I stay in here over the weekend, I lose the business. I lose the house. Then where will Leo and Mia live? Do you want them on the street? He was doing it again, twisting the knife, using my siblings as leverage. But $50,000. Sao Yu Jing Halin, 2# is greater than I, whispered. Daddy, that is everything. If I use that, I cannot finish school. I will have to drop out. So? He scoffed, waving his hand as if my education were a minor inconvenience. Like a fly buzzing around his head. You can take a semester off. You can work. You can go back later. I cannot get my freedom back later. Isabella, I am your father. I gave you life. The entitlement in his voice was breathtaking. It was a physical force, pressing against the glass. He truly believed that my future, my dreams, and my security were just assets he could liquidate to cover his mistakes. What about Karen? I asked, trying to deflect. Cannot her family help? Karen is useless. He spat, his eyes narrowing. Her family hates me. You are the only one I have. Bella, you are my legacy. You are the only one who can save this family. He leaned in closer, his forehead resting against the plexiglass. Transfer the money to your checking account tonight, he instructed, his voice low and commanding. Come back first thing in the morning with a cashier's check. Bail is set at $50,000 cash for both of us. It is exactly what you have. It is like it was meant to be, as if my grandmother had saved every penny of her pension for 30 years, just so her son could bribe his way out of a fraud charge. I cannot, I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. David froze. His expression shifted from manipulative warmth to cold, hard rage. Excuse me? I cannot do it. Daddy, I cannot give you my school money. It is all I have. He slammed his fist against the metal shelf beneath the window. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I jumped in my seat. You selfish little brat, he roared, his face turning a shade of red that matched the anger boiling in my own chest. After everything I have done for you, I put a roof over your head. I bought you clothes. I fed you. And now, when I am rotting in a cell, you are worried about textbooks? You did not feed me. I shot back, my voice rising, surprising myself. Mom fed me. Grandma fed me. You left when I was 12. Do not rewrite history with me, he yelled. I am the victim here. Isabella, I am being persecuted, and my own daughter is sitting there, watching me drown, clutching her pennies like a miser. You are just like your grandmother, cold, heartless. He was not listening. He never listened to David. Other people were not human beings with feelings and needs. They were vending machines. You put in the bare minimum of attention, and you expected a payout. When the machine did not dispense what he wanted, he kicked it. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but my resolve was hardening into something brittle and sharp. I am not giving you the money, David, I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. I will watch the kids. I will make sure they are safe. But I am not selling my future to buy your freedom. David's eyes widened in shock. He looked at me as if he had never seen me before. Then, his eyes narrowed into slits of pure malice. If you walk out of here, he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, do not bother coming back. You are dead to me. You hear me? You are no daughter of mine. I looked at him, really looked at him. Through the scratched glass, I saw the lines of dissipation around his mouth, the emptiness in his eyes, the desperate, clawing neediness that he disguised as power. I realized then that the father I had worshipped, the hero I had waited for on front porches and at soccer games, did not exist. He was a fiction I had written to survive. I slowly hung up the phone. He was still screaming, mouthing words behind the glass. His face contorted and ugly. Empotarage. He was pointing a finger at me, stabbing the air, but I could not hear him anymore. I turned around and walked away. The walk back down the long corridor felt different. The air was still cold and sterile, but the crushing weight on my chest had shifted. It was replaced by a different kind of pain, a sharper, cleaner ache, the ache of a severed limb. I had just cut off my father. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the night air. It was freezing, but I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the biting wind. I reached into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around the cold gold of the Rolex. $50,000. He wanted $50,000. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. I had $50,000 right here in my pocket. I could sell this watch. I could bail him out. I could be the good daughter one last time. But as I walked to my car, the metal warmed against my palm. He said my education was worth nothing compared to his freedom. He said I owed him for my life. I unlocked my car door and slid inside. The engine roared to life, louder and more obnoxious than ever in the quiet lot. I drove toward the exit, my hands steady on the wheel. I was not going to the bank. I was not going to transfer the funds. But as I drove, a new thought, dark and insidious, crept into my mind. David had been so sure about the money. It is exactly what you have, he had said. It is like it was meant to be. How did he know exactly how much was in the fund? I had never told him the final balance with interest. Grandma had never told him. She had kept it a secret specifically so he would not guilt her into giving it to him. And then I remembered what Mia had said. Daddy hid the paper in the safe. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the weather settled over me. I needed to go back to his house. I needed to see that safe. I was not going there to save him. I was going there to find out just how deep the rot went. I collected my brother and sister from Mrs. Higgins' house with a murmur of apologies and a promise to return her Tupperware containers, though I knew that was the last thing on my mind. Leo was asleep, his small body heavy and warm as I carried him to the car, while Mia trailed behind me, clutching a bag of snickerdoodles like it was a survival kit. The drive to my mother's house was short, but it felt like crossing a border between two warring nations. I was bringing refugees from the enemy camp into neutral territory, and I knew the treaty was about to be violated. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark save for the porch light, a solitary beacon in the suburban gloom. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The silence was absolute. In my pocket, the stolen Rolex pressed against my hip bone, a hard, cold reminder of the crime I had committed. In my mind, the image of my father screaming behind the glass played on a loop. "You are dead to me." I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of old upholstery and stale fast food, and opened the door. "Come on, Mia," I whispered. "Let us get you inside." My mother opened the front door before I could even knock. She was still wearing her Thanksgiving outfit, the pearls still around her neck, but her face was stripped of its earlier composure. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mouth set in a tight, grim line. She looked at me, then at the sleeping boy in my arms, and finally at Mia, who shrank behind my leg. "I told you not to go," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the cold night air like a whip. I had no choice. "Mom," I said, my voice weary. They were hiding in a closet. Child Protective Services was coming. She stepped back to let us in, but her body language was rigid. She did not offer to take Leo. She did not bend down to comfort Mia. She stood like a sentinel, guarding her fortress against an invasion of chaos. "They cannot stay here, Isabella," she stated flatly as I walked into the foyer. "I am not running a halfway house for David's mistakes. Just for tonight," I pleaded, shifting Leo's weight. "Please, they have nowhere else to go. Karen is in jail too." My mother let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Of course she is. 2 peas in a rotten pod." She turned and walked into the kitchen, the heels of her shoes clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. I followed her, guiding Mia with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I need to give them a bath," I said to my mother's back. "They, Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than they smell like that house." My mother spun around, her eyes blazing. "Do not use the guest towels. Use the old ones in the linen closet, and make sure they do not eat anything in the living room." I just had the carpets cleaned. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw a woman who had been hurt so badly by my father that she had built a wall of rules and perfection to keep the pain out. But in doing so, she had walled me out too. She did not see 2 terrified children. She saw the offspring of the woman who stole her husband. She saw the baggage. She saw the inconvenience. "Okay, Mom," I said softly. "I will use the old towels." I led the kids upstairs to the bathroom that I used to use when I lived here full-time. It was a sterile space, smelling of lavender and bleach. I turned on the faucet, letting the warm water fill the tub. The steam rose up, fogging the mirror, blurring my reflection until I looked like a ghost. I undressed Leo first. He was so tired he could barely stand. His skin was pale, and I noticed a small bruise on his shin. "How did you get this, buddy?" I asked, tracing the purple mark with my thumb. "I fell over a bottle," he mumbled, his eyes drooping. "Daddy left it on the stairs." a bottle on the stairs, a hazard in their own home. Rage flickered in my chest, hot and sudden, but I pushed it down. I needed to be calm. I needed to be the mother they did not have right now. I lifted him into the water. Mia climbed in next to him. The water turned a murky gray as I washed the grime of neglect from their skin. I used the expensive lavender soap my mother kept for guests, feeling a petty sense of satisfaction as I lathered it onto a washcloth. Mia sat quietly, playing with the bubbles, shaping them into mountains on her knees. She was too quiet for a 7-year-old. Her eyes, usually bright and mischievous, were dark and thoughtful. "Is Mommy coming back?" she asked suddenly, her voice echoing slightly against the tile walls. I paused, my hand resting on Leo's back. "I do not know, Sweetie. Not tonight. She is crying because she is scared of the bad people," Mia said matter-of-factly. "But Daddy is not scared. Daddy was just mad." "Mad at who?" I asked gently, rinsing the shampoo from Leo's hair. "Mad at Mommy," Mia said. "They were yelling about the paper." I froze. My hands went still in the warm water. "What paper?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "The green paper," Mia said, looking up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "The one Grandma gave to Daddy before she went to sleep forever." My heart skipped a beat. Grandma Sarah had died 3 months ago. It had been sudden, a stroke in her sleep. After the funeral, David had told me there was nothing left. He said she had refinanced her house to pay for medical bills and that the estate was bankrupt. I had believed him. I had been too grief-stricken to ask for proof. "What about the paper, Mia?" I asked, leaning closer to the tub. "Mommy Karen wanted to burn it in the fireplace," Mia whispered, as if sharing a naughty secret. "She said Grandma was a witch and her money was cursed. But Daddy said no. Daddy said it was his ticket." His ticket? The words hung in the humid air of the bathroom, heavy and suffocating. "Ticket to what?" I asked. "I do not know." Mia shrugged, destroying her bubble mountain with a slap of her hand. "Daddy put it in the box." The metal box in the wall behind the painting of the sad clown. "He told Mommy she was too stupid to touch it." I sat back on my heels, the wet washcloth dripping onto the bath mat. My head was spinning. A metal box, a safe. I knew exactly the painting she was talking about. It was a hideous velvet painting of a weeping clown that hung in my father's study. I had always hated it. I had never known there was a wall safe behind it. My mind raced, connecting dots I had not even realized were there. David knew exactly how much was in my college fund. $50,000. Grandma had always told me, since I was a little girl, "Isabella, I am putting away a little nest egg for you. When I am gone, you will be taken care of." But when she died, David said there was nothing. "Zero, Mia?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Did you see the paper? Did it look like a check?" "It looked like money, but big," Mia said, yawning. "It had a lot of zeros." A chill swept through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. If David had a check, or a will, or an insurance policy that he had hidden, Sayuting Halin, 2 hashes greater than if he had lied to me about Grandma's estate. Sayuting Halin, Arting Haldayu. Then he had not just neglected me, he had stolen from me. He had stolen my future to fund his lifestyle of fake luxury and real squalor. I finished washing them in a daze. I wrapped them in the scratchy, old towels my mother had designated for them, their small teeth chattering slightly. I dressed them in clean, oversized t-shirts I found in my old dresser. I tucked them into the pull-out sofa in the guest room. I sat on the edge of the bed until their breathing evened out and they slipped into a deep, exhausted sleep. I stood up and walked out into the hallway. The house was quiet. My mother had retreated to her bedroom. The door was firmly shut. I was alone. I walked to the window at the end of the hall and looked out at the dark street. My reflection in the glass looked older than 19. I looked tired. I looked haunted. The conversation at the jail replayed in my mind. It is exactly what you have. It is like it was meant to be. He knew. He knew because he had seen the paperwork. He knew because he probably had the original documents locked in that safe. And then the spiral began. If he stole the inheritance, what else had he lied about? I thought about the time he said he could not come to my high school graduation because his car broke down. Had he just been hungover? I thought about the time he borrowed $500 from me to pay for emergency dental work. Had that gone to the bail bondsman? I thought about the way he looked at me tonight. Not with love, not with concern, but with calculation, like I was a bank account with legs. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a cracking sensation. It was the sound of the pedestal I had kept him on finally crumbling to dust. I had spent my whole life making excuses for him. He is just stressed. He is just bad with money. He loves me in his own way, but love does not steal. Love does not hide in a closet while children starve. Love does not demand you sell your future to buy its freedom. I looked down at my phone. It was almost midnight. I could stay here. I could sleep on the floor of my old room. I could wake up in the morning, give the kids breakfast, and wait for the fallout, but I knew I would not sleep. The image of the sad clown painting burned in my mind. The green paper, the ticket. I needed to know if there was a will, if there was money that belonged to me. It changed everything. It meant I did not have to drop out of school. It meant I could save myself. But more than that, I needed to know the truth. I needed to see the depth of his betrayal with my own eyes. I needed to see the bottom of the hole he had dug for us. I turned away from the window. I walked quietly past my mother's door. I could hear the faint sound of the television from inside her room. She was probably watching the news. Safe in her bubble of righteousness, I crept back into the guest room. I looked at Leo and Mia one last time. They looked so peaceful. They deserved better than this. They deserved a sister who was not a victim. I grabbed my car keys from the dresser. I was going back to the house of secrets. I told myself I was just going to look, just to check the safe. If Mia was just making up stories, if there was nothing there, then I would know I was crazy. But as I walked down the stairs, careful to avoid the creaky step on the third tread, I knew I was not crazy. I was waking up. I scribbled a note on the notepad by the kitchen phone. Mom, went to get clothes for the kids. Back in an hour. Please check on them. Bella. It was a lie. I was not going for clothes. I was going for answers. I stepped out into the night again. The wind had died down, leaving a stillness that felt ominous. I got into my car, the engine groaning in protest as I turned the key. As I pulled away from the curb, leaving the safety of my mother's house behind, I felt a shift inside me. The fear was still there, churning in my gut, but it was being overtaken by something colder, harder. I was done being the good daughter. I was done being the peacekeeper. David had spent 19 years teaching me that money was the only thing that mattered to him. Tonight, I was going to see if he was right. I drove fast, the speedometer climbing as I raced back toward the gated community. I was driving into the heart of the storm. And for the first time in my life, I was not looking for shelter. I was looking for the lightning. I stood in the center of my father's study, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the stagnant air. The house was silent, a heavy, oppressive silence that felt like it was watching me. On the wall, the velvet painting of the weeping clown stared back at me with hollow, mocking eyes. I reached out and gripped the frame, my fingers digging into the dust that coated the top. With a grunt of effort, I swung the painting away from the wall. There it was, just as Mia had said. A gray metal safe was embedded in the drywall. It looked impenetrable, a steel box of secrets with a digital keypad that stared blankly at me. I tried my birthday. Nothing. I tried my father's birthday. The red light blinked once. A silent rejection. I tried the last 4 digits of his social security number. Again, the red light. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the safe door. I was locked out. The truth was inches away, separated from me by a mechanism I could not defeat. I felt a surge of frustration so intense it made my hands shake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the house apart. Then, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled the phone out. The screen illuminated the darkness. County Correctional Facility. It was the second call of the night. I slid my thumb across the screen. Hello? Isabella? Is that you? The voice was high-pitched, trembling, and laced with a theatrical sort of panic. It was Karen. Yes, Karen, I am here, I said, my voice flat. Oh, thank God, Karen sobbed. The sound was wet and jagged. Bella, you have to get me out of here. Please, you have no idea what it is like. There are women here who, so yu ting hao ling, 2 hashes greater than who have done terrible things. One of them just threatened to cut my hair off because I looked at her wrong. I am going to die in here. Bella, I am not built for this. Her hysteria was infectious. Despite my dislike for the woman, I felt a pang of pity. Karen was a creature of malls and nail salons. A woman whose biggest crisis was usually a chipped manicure. She was soft. Prison would eat her alive. Dad wants $50,000. Karen, I said, leaning back against the desk. I do not have it. I cannot get it. I know. She wept. David told me. He is? So yu ting hao ling. 2 hashes greater than he is furious. Bella. But listen to me. You do not need $50,000 for me. My bail is lower. It is set at $5,000 because so yu ting hao ling. 2 hash is greater than because I am just an accessory. They know I did not do anything. It is all a misunderstanding. $5,000. That was a tangible number. It was not a fortune. But to me, standing there in the dark, with a negative bank balance, it might as well have been $1 million. I do not have 5,000 either. Karen, I said wearily, but you have the car. She blurted out. The words hung in the air, sharp and precise. What? I asked. Your car, Bella. The Honda. It is a good car. It has low mileage. You could sell it. Or Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than, or take a title loan. There are places open 24 hours. You could get 5,000 easily. My stomach dropped. My car. My freedom. The vehicle that took me to school, to work, to the library. The only thing I owned that my father's name was not on. Karen, I need my car to get to school, I said, my grip on the phone tightening. School? She shrieked, her voice cracking. Bella, I am talking about my life. You can take the bus for a few weeks. As soon as we are out, David will buy you a new car. A better one, a BMW. He promised. We just need to liquidate some assets. But we cannot do that from inside a cell. We need you to be the bridge. Bella, be the bridge. The bridge. That was what I had always been. The bridge between their chaos and the real world. The bridge they walked over without ever looking down to see if I was crumbling. He will pay me back? I asked, my voice small. Double. Karen promised. I swear on my mother's grave. Double. Bella, $10,000. You can buy whatever car you want. Just Sa유ting howling. 2# is greater than please. Think of the kids. Think of Mia and Leo. They need their mother. Do you want them to grow up knowing you left their mother to rot in a cage over a used Honda? The guilt trip was masterfully executed. It hit the exact frequency of my insecurity. Do you want to be the reason the family falls apart? I closed my eyes. I pictured Mia in the bathtub, asking if mommy was coming back. I pictured Leo's bruise. If I got Karen out, maybe she could take care of them. Maybe I could go back to my life. Okay, I whispered. Okay? She breathed. I will. Sa유ting howling. 2# is greater than I will see what I can do. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. I stood there in the dark for a long moment. I felt dirty. I felt used. But I also felt a strange, grim sense of purpose. I had a mission. I left the study, leaving the safe locked and the clown painting crooked. I drove back to my mother's house. It was 3 a.m. when I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. I let myself in quietly, tiptoeing up the stairs. I checked on the kids. They were still sleeping soundly. I went into my old room and collapsed onto the bed. Fully clothed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Sell the car, save the family, get the money back, buy a better car. It sounded like a plan. It sounded like a solution. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the blinds and the smell of coffee was drifting up from the kitchen. I sat up, my head pounding. Reality crashed back in. I needed the title to my car. It was in the glove box, but I needed to find a buyer. I pulled out my phone and started searching for sell car for cash today. I walked downstairs, my phone in my hand. My mother was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, gripping a mug of coffee with both hands. She looked like she had not slept. Good morning, I mumbled, heading for the coffee pot. Isabella, she said. Her voice was ice cold. I froze. What is this? She asked. She held up a piece of paper. It was the title to my car. I patted my pockets. I must have left it on the kitchen table when I came in last night. In my exhausted stupor, Sa유ting howling. 2# is greater than I was just looking for it. I stammered. Why? She asked, stepping closer. Why do you need the title to your car at 8 a.m? I took a deep breath. Mom? Please, Karen called. Her bail is $5,000. If I sell the car, I can get her out. She will pay me back double next week. It is just a temporary loan. My mother stared at me. Her expression was not angry. It was horrified. It was the look one might give a person who is about to jump off a cliff. You are going to sell your car? She repeated slowly. The car you worked double shifts for 2 years to buy? The car that gets you to college? You are going to sell it to bail out that woman? She is the mother of my brother and sister, I argued, my defensive walls going up. She is a leech, my mother shouted, slamming the title down on the counter. And your father is a parasite. They are draining you dry. Isabella, can you not see it? They do not care about you. They only call you when they need money. That is not true, I yelled back. Daddy loves me. He is just in a bad spot. He is always in a bad spot. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard. Wake up. He stole your childhood. And now he is stealing your adulthood. If you sell that car, you are not saving them. You are drowning with them. Let go of me. I pushed her away. I stumbled back, hitting my hip against the kitchen table. You are just jealous. I spat out the words before I could stop them. You are jealous because he moved on, and you are still here, alone in this big empty house. You want me to hate him so you can feel better about yourself. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went white. Her eyes filled with sudden, shocking tears. She raised her hand and slapped me. The sound was sharp, cracking through the kitchen like a whip. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned. I stood there, stunned. My mother had never hit me. Not once. Not ever. She looked at her own hand, trembling, horror dawning on her face. Bella, sao yu ting hao ling. Due cancelletto e maggiore di. Sao yu ting hao ling. 2 hash is greater than I did not mean. Sao yu ting hao ling. Ting hao da yu. I touched my cheek. It was hot. Something inside me broke. The tether that held me to this house, to her rules, to her safety. It snapped. I looked at her, and for the first time, I did not see my mother. I saw another person trying to control me, another person trying to tell me who I was and what I should do. I am leaving, I said, my voice deadly calm. Bella, please. She stepped forward, reaching out. I am sorry. I was just so scared for you. Do not touch me. I hissed, backing away. I turned and ran up the stairs. I burst into the guest room. Leo, Mia, wake up. We are going. The kids sat up, groggy and confused. Where are we going? Leo rubbed his eyes. Home, I said, grabbing their clothes and stuffing them into a plastic bag. We are going to Daddy's house. I dragged them down the stairs, ignoring their protests. My mother was standing at the bottom of the steps, tears streaming down her face. Isabella, do not do this, she begged. Do not take those children back to that house. It is not safe. You are making a mistake. I pushed past her, herding the kids out the front door. The only mistake I made was coming here, I said coldly. I walked out to the car, threw the bag in the back seat, and buckled the kids in. My cheek was still throbbing, a pulsing reminder of the betrayal. I grabbed the title from the counter where she had left it. I had run back in for a split second to snatch it while she was sobbing in the doorway. I started the engine and reversed out of the driveway, tires screeching against the asphalt. I looked in the rearview mirror. My mother was standing on the porch, her hand over her mouth, watching me go. I felt a stab of agony in my chest, but I shoved it down, burying it under layers of anger and righteous indignation. She did not understand. Nobody understood. I was the only one who could fix this. I drove toward the highway. I was not going to school today. I was not going to work. I was going to a used car dealership on the strip. I was going to sell my car. I was going to get the cash. And then I was going to bring Karen home. And then, I would go back to that house, the house of secrets. I would be the adult. I would be the savior. But as I merged onto the highway, heading back toward the wealthy suburb that was really a graveyard of dreams, I did not feel like a savior. I felt like I was free-falling. I had cut the lifeline. There was no turning back now. I was alone with the wolves, and I had just decided to feed them my arm in the hopes that they would not eat the rest of me. The house was breathing. That was the only way I could describe it. As I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence that followed the chaos of the last 24 hours, the house seemed to inhale and exhale with a drafty, rattling wheeze. I had put Leo and Mia to bed in their room, surrounded by the debris of their disrupted childhoods. They had fallen asleep instantly, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of being dragged from their mother to a stranger's house, to my mother's, and now back to this mausoleum of secrets. I was alone. The silence was heavier here than at my mother's house. At my mother's, the silence was disciplined, a quiet born of order. Here, the silence felt pregnant with disaster, like the calm before a structural collapse. I walked down the stairs, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. My cheek still throbbed where my mother had slapped me. The physical pain was a dull ache, but the emotional severance was sharper. I had cut the cord. I had burned the bridge. I was truly on my own now. The guardian of 2 small children and the savior of 2 irresponsible parents. I had spent the afternoon at a shady used car lot on the Strip, negotiating with a man who chewed tobacco and looked at my Honda like it was scrap metal. I had walked away with $4,800 in cash, enough for the bail bondsman, with a little left over for groceries. The money was currently sitting in a thick envelope on the kitchen counter, next to the rotting fruit bowl. I had arranged to meet the bondsman at the jail in the morning to release Karen. But first, I had a date with a sad clown. I walked into the study. The room was cold, the heating vent in the corner rattling uselessly. I turned on the desk lamp, casting a pool of yellow light onto the leather surface where my father played at being a businessman. I moved the chair aside and walked to the painting. The weeping clown stared at me, his painted tears mocking my own dry eyes. I gripped the frame and swung it open again, revealing the gray metal face of the wall safe. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears. I stared at the keypad. He told Mommy she was too stupid to touch it. Mia had said, Daddy put it in the box. If David thought Karen was too stupid, he would not use a code she could guess. He would not use their anniversary. He would not use her birthday. He would use something that belonged only to him, or something he viewed as his property. I raised my hand, my index finger hovering over the numbers. I thought about the narcissism of the man. What was the most important day in his life? His own birthday? No, that was too obvious. Then I remembered something he used to say when I was little, before the divorce, before the bitterness set in. You are my greatest investment. Bella, my greatest investment. I punched in the numbers of my own birth date, month, day, year. 6 digits. The keypad let out a cheerful, electronic chirp. The heavy locking mechanism clicked with a sound that felt like a gunshot in the quiet room. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. The door swung open, a fraction of an inch. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. I pulled it open. I expected to see stacks of cash. I expected to see the green paper Mia had talked about, bundles of $100 bills bound with rubber bands, the secret hoard that David had kept from us while we ate generic cereal and wore thrift store coats. The safe was full, but not with cash. It was stuffed with envelopes, thick, white envelopes. Some were open, some were still sealed. I reached in and pulled out a stack. The paper felt cold and dry against my skin. I sat down on the floor, crossing my legs, and dumped the stack onto the carpet. I picked up the first letter. It was from a major credit card company. The logo was red and aggressive. Final notice, it said in bold letters. Immediate action required. I scanned the address window. It was addressed to this house, but the name was not David Miller. The name was Isabella Marie Miller. I frowned, confusion wrinkling my forehead. Why was I getting mail here? I had never lived here. I had never used this address for anything. I tore the envelope open. My fingers fumbled with the paper. I unfolded the letter. Dear Ms. Miller, this is a final attempt to collect on your outstanding balance of $12,430 before we refer your account to legal counsel for judgment. Sao Jinghao Ling, R. Jinghao Dayu, $12,000. I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor like a dying bird. I picked up the next one. A different bank, a different credit card, past due, amount owed, $8,600. I picked up another, an auto loan for a luxury SUV, default, notice, repossession imminent. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. So violent I had to put a hand on the floor to steady myself. The room was spinning. The yellow light of the desk lamp seemed to stretch and distort. I did not understand. I had a debit card with a student checking account. I had never applied for a credit card. I had never bought a luxury SUV. I drove a 10-year-old Honda that I had just sold for scrap value. I started ripping open envelopes frantically. A personal loan for $15,000. A line of credit for home improvements, jewelry store financing, all of them, every single one of them. They were in my name, Isabella Marie Miller. I looked at the dates. The first credit card was opened 3 days after my 18th birthday. The car loan was taken out 2 months later. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was not a slow dawning. It was a sudden, violent crash. My father, he had not just forgotten my birthday. He had been waiting for it. He had been counting down the days until I turned 18. Not to celebrate my adulthood, but to harvest my clean credit history. He had used my social security number. He had used my name. He had impersonated me online, signed electronic documents, and leveraged my future to fund his present. I was not just broke, I was ruined. I was 19 years old, and I was likely hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I would never be able to rent an apartment. I would never be able to get a student loan. I would never be able to buy a car. I was bankrupt before I had even started my life. A sob ripped its way out of my throat, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the empty study. I covered my mouth with my hand, biting down on my knuckles to stifle the scream that was building in my chest. You are my greatest investment. The words twisted in my memory, transforming from a term of endearment into a literal, grotesque truth. I was an asset. I was a resource to be mined until the vein ran dry. I looked back at the safe. There was one more document at the bottom, sitting beneath the pile of debt. It looked different. It was a thick, blue folder with a legal seal. I reached in and pulled it out. My hands were numb. I felt like I was moving underwater. I opened the folder. Last Will and Testament of Sarah Elizabeth Miller, my grandmother. I flipped past the legal jargon, my eyes scanning for the distribution of assets. David had told me she died penniless. He told me the house was heavily mortgaged and the bank was taking it. Article 4. I give, devise, and bequeath my real property, located at 4,502 Willow Creek Lane, to my beloved granddaughter, Isabella Marie Miller, free and clear of all encumbrances. Sao Jinghao Ling, R. Jinghao Dai, Willow Creek Lane. This house, The room tilted. I put a hand on the desk to keep from falling over. Grandma Sarah had owned this house outright. She had left it to me, not to David, to me. I read on. Article 5. I give, divisa, and bequeath the residue of my estate, including all cash, stocks, and bonds, to be held in trust for the education and maintenance of Isabella Marie Miller. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. Jinghao Dayu. There was no mortgage. There was no bankruptcy. David had hidden the will. He had never filed it with the probate court. He had simply continued living here, pretending the house was his, while he spent the money she had left for me. And when that money ran out, he had stolen my identity to keep the party going. He had been living in my house, eating my food, spending my inheritance, and then he had the audacity to call me from jail and demand I sell my own car, the only thing I actually paid for, to bail him out. I looked at the pile of papers on the floor, the debt, the lies, the theft. This was not just bad parenting. This was malice. This was a systematic destruction of a human being. I felt something inside me die. It was the little girl who used to wait by the window for her daddy to come home. It was the teenager who studied hard to make him proud. It was the young woman who had driven through the night to save his children. She was gone, burned to ash in the fire of this revelation. In her place, something else was waking up, something cold, something sharp, something that felt a lot like the hatred my mother had tried to warn me about. I gathered the papers. I did not put them back in the safe. I stacked them neatly. The credit card bills, the loan defaults, the stolen will. I held them against my chest. The air in the room felt different now. It was no longer oppressive. It was clarifying. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands had stopped shaking. I walked out of the study, leaving the safe door wide open. I walked into the kitchen. The envelope with the $4,800 sat on the counter. I picked it up. I looked at the money. It was the price of my car, the price of my freedom. I could walk away. I could take this money, take the kids, and run. But running was what a victim would do. And I was done being a victim. I looked at the magnet on the refrigerator. Al's bail bonds. I needed Karen out, not because I wanted to save her, but because I needed a witness. I needed her to turn on him, and I needed to be the one holding the leash. I pocketed the money. I went back to the living room and sat in the dark, clutching the stolen will like a weapon. I did not sleep. I sat there and watched the sun come up, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and bloody orange. I waited for the morning. I waited for the next act. The tragedy had already happened. My life, as I knew it, was over. But the retribution was just beginning. I was going to bail Karen out. I was going to bring her back to this house, my house, and then I was going to introduce them to the new Isabella. I sat in the high-backed leather chair behind my father's desk, the position of power offering a hollow sort of comfort. Outside, the sky had turned a flat, indifferent gray, threatening snow. Inside, the only light came from the desk lamp, illuminating the damning evidence spread out before me like an autopsy of my family's morality. The credit card statements with my name on them, the notices of default, and the blue folder containing my grandmother's will, the document that proved this house, this room, and the very floor beneath my feet belonged to me. I had been waiting for 3 hours. I had the envelope with $4,800 in my pocket, the proceeds from selling my car, the blood money I had intended to use to bail Karen out just so I could drag her back here and force the truth out of her. But I had not left. Something had kept me here, Perhaps it was the fear that if I left this room, if I looked away from these papers for even a second, the reality of what they had done to me would evaporate, and I would be gaslighted back into being the obedient daughter. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The sound of a heavy engine roared up the driveway. It was not the smooth purr of a sedan. It was the aggressive, throaty rumble of a large truck or SUV. Tires crunched violently against the gravel. A car door slammed with enough force to rattle the window panes in the study. My heart seized in my chest. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy and wooden. I heard the front door crash open against the wall. "Honey, we are home." It was my father's voice, but it was not the warm, charismatic baritone he used for guests. It was jagged, manic, pitched too high. It was the voice of a man running on adrenaline and terror. I did not move. I stood my ground behind the desk, my hand resting on the stack of stolen mail. Heavy footsteps pounded across the foyer, accompanied by the click-clack of Karen's heels. They were moving fast. They were not coming to check on the children. They were coming straight for the money. The study door flew open. David and Karen stood in the threshold. They looked like wreckage. My father's expensive suit was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose. His face was pale, covered in a sheen of perspiration, his eyes darting wildly around the room. Karen looked even worse. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black rivulets, and her blonde hair was a tangled bird's nest. She smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial disinfectant. They stopped dead when they saw me. For a second, the only sound was their ragged breathing. They looked at me, then they looked at the painting of the sad clown, which was leaning against the wall on the floor. Then they looked at the open safe. The color drained from my father's face. "What are you doing?" David whispered. The menace in his voice was immediate. A reflex. I picked up the credit card statement. I held it up so the light hit the bold red letters of the past due notice. "I know," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "I know everything." David took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. "You have no right," he snarled. "You have no right to break into my safe. That is my private property." "Your private property?" I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "That is funny, David, because according to this pile of debt, your private property is financed with my name." I threw the papers onto the desk. They scattered across the leather surface. "Identity theft," I said, pronouncing each syllable clearly. "Fraud, embezzlement. You stole my credit. You stole my future. And you stole this house." Karen let out a gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at David, her eyes wide with panic. "David, she knows. She found the will." "Shut up, Karen," David roared, not looking at her. His eyes were locked on me, cold and predatory. He walked toward the desk. He did not look ashamed. He did not look sorry. He looked furious that he had been caught. "You do not understand how the world works, Isabella," he said, his voice dropping to a condescending lecture. "You think this is stealing? This is family management. I am the head of this household. I make the decisions. You opened credit cards in my name when I was 18, I shouted, my control slipping. "You racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. You ruined me. I did what I had to do to keep a roof over your head," he yelled back, slamming his hands onto the desk, leaning over so his face was inches from mine. "Do you like this house? Do you like having food on the table? That costs money. Money I did not have because your grandmother was a vindictive old witch who tried to cut me out. She left the house to me, I screamed, grabbing the blue folder. It is mine. You have been living in my house, spending my inheritance, and treating me like a servant. David snatched the folder from my hand. He threw it across the room. It hit the bookshelf with a thud and slid to the floor. You are a child, he spat. You do not own anything unless I say you own it. You are my daughter. You are my creation. Everything you have is mine. Your name, your credit, your life. It all belongs to me. The sheer entitlement of his words took my breath away. He truly believed it. He believed he owned me. I backed away from the desk, putting distance between us. I am going to the police, I said. I have the evidence. I am sending you both back to jail. And this time, you are staying there. Karen let out a high-pitched wail. No, David, do something. We cannot go back. The loan sharks. So you ting howling. 2 hash is greater than they said. We have 24 hours. David's head snapped toward Karen, then back to me. A new desperation entered his eyes. We are not going back to jail, he said, his voice low and dangerous. And you are not going to the police. He started coming around the desk. I took another step back, my hip bumping against the side table. My coat pocket was heavy with the cash and the watch. Stay away from me, I warned. You are going to fix this. Isabella, David said, advancing on me. We borrowed money to get out. Big money, dangerous money. We need to pay them back by tomorrow. You are going to sign a new loan. We are going to refinance the car. I sold the car. I wanted to scream, but I bit my tongue. If they knew I had the cash on me, they would take it by force. I am not signing anything, I said. David lunged. It was not a strike, but a grab. He reached for my arm. I flinched, twisting my body to avoid his grip. I stumbled over the rug as I flailed to keep my balance. The heavy wool coat I was wearing swung wildly. Gravity took over. The Rolex watch, the solid gold day date I had taken from his dresser the night before, slid out of my pocket. Time seemed to slow down. I watched in horror as the gold watch tumbled through the air, catching the light of the desk lamp, spinning end over end. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy, metallic clatter and skidded to a stop right at David's feet. Silence, absolute, suffocating silence filled the room. David looked down at the watch. Then he looked up at me. The expression on his face shifted. The desperation vanished, replaced by a slow, triumphant, malicious smile. It was the look of a wolf that had just seen the trap snap shut on the rabbit's leg. He bent down slowly and picked up the watch. He polished the face of it with his thumb. Well, he said softly. Karen gasped again, but this time it was theatrical. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She stole it. I told you. David, I told you she was a thief. She came here last night and robbed us while we were helpless in jail. I saw you ting howling. 2 hash is greater than I took it to keep it safe. I stammered, the lie tasting weak on my tongue. Safe? David mocked. In your pocket? While you were breaking into my safe? He took a step toward me, holding the watch up like a holy relic. Do you know what this is? Isabella? This is grand larceny. This watch is worth $50,000 in this state. Stealing property of this value is a felony, a Class 2 felony. He was turning it around. He was flipping the script. You stole my identity. I shouted. That is a felony. He shrugged. Can you prove it? The papers are right there. I pointed to the desk. Papers? David laughed. Those are just bills. I can say you authorized them. I can say you gave me permission. It is a family dispute, a civil matter. But this? He shook the watch. This is theft. Plain and simple. I call the cops right now. And they find you with stolen goods in your pocket? Who do you think they are going to believe? The respectable businessman? Or the college student who broke into her father's safe and tried to run off with the family heirlooms? He was right. Or at least, he was right enough to terrify me. He knew how to manipulate the system. He knew how to play the victim. I felt the walls of the room closing in. I had come here to be the judge. And suddenly, I was the defendant. What do you want? I whispered. David smiled. He walked over to the desk and opened the top drawer. He pulled out a fresh file folder. He tossed it onto the desk next to the scattered credit card bills. Sit down, he commanded. I did not move. Sit down, he roared, his voice booming off the walls. I flinched and sat in the guest chair opposite the desk. My hands were trembling in my lap. I could feel the envelope of cash in my pocket burning against my leg. I prayed he did not ask to search me. David sat in his chair, regaining his throne. He placed the watch carefully on the desk between us, like a judge placing a gavel. Here's the situation, he said, his voice calm and businesslike, as if we were discussing a merger rather than extortion. We owe money to some very impatient people. They fronted the bail, but the interest is Saoitsinghaalin. 2# is greater than aggressive. We need $50,000 by tomorrow noon. I do not have $50,000. I said, you know that. You spent it all. David ignored me. He tapped the new folder. This is a transfer of title for your Honda. And this, he flipped a page, is an application for a high-interest emergency loan. We are going to use the car as collateral, and we are going to use your student status to qualify for the rest. You are going to sign these. I stared at him. The car I had already sold. The car that was currently sitting in a lot on the other side of town. I cannot sign over the car, I said, my voice shaking. Why not? Karen interjected. Stepping up beside David, you said you would help. You said you would be the bridge, because it is my car. I lead. It is a family asset. David slammed his hand on the table. And right now, the family is in crisis. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. You have 2 choices. Isabella, option A. You sign these papers. We get the money. We pay off the sharks. We all go back to being a happy family. I forget you broke into my safe. And you forget about Saoitsinghaalin. 2# is greater than whatever this misunderstanding about the credit cards is. He paused for effect. Option B. I pick up this phone. I call the police. I tell them my daughter broke into my home while I was detained, terrorized her siblings, and stole $50,000 worth of jewelry. You go to jail. You get a felony record. You get kicked out of college. And trust me, honey, you will not survive jail. You are too soft. I looked at Karen. She was nodding eagerly, her eyes bright with malice. She wanted this. She wanted to see me broken. I looked at David. He was enjoying this. He was not just desperate for money. He was relishing the power. He had reasserted his dominance. He had put me back in my place. I realized then that there was no bottom. There was no line he would not cross. He would send his own daughter to prison to save his own skin. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. The fear was still there, but it was freezing into something hard and sharp. If I told them I sold the car, they would search me. They would find the cash. They would take it. and I would still be left with nothing. No car, no money, and a felony charge hanging over my head. I had to play along. I had to buy time. I need a pen, I said quietly. David's smile widened. A genuine, proud smile. That is my girl. I knew you would see reason. He pushed a heavy Mont Blanc pen across the desk toward me. I picked it up. My hand felt heavy. I looked at the paper. Department of Motor Vehicles. Transfer of title. I pretended to read it. My mind was racing. I needed to get out of this room. I needed to get to the police station before they did. But David was blocking the door, and Karen was hovering like a vulture. Saluting Harling. 2# is greater than I cannot sign this yet, I said. David's smile faltered. Why not? I need to go to the bathroom, I said. I feel sick. I am going to throw up. It was not entirely a lie. The bile was rising in my throat. Sign first. Throw up later, David said coldly. I gagged, covering my mouth with my hand. I stood up, swaying on my feet. I am serious. Dad, I am going to be sick right now. On your desk, David recoiled, pulling the papers away to protect them. Jesus. Fine. Go, Karen. Go with her, he ordered. Make sure she does not try anything stupid. I stumbled toward the door, clutching my stomach. Karen followed me, her heels clicking aggressively. Do not think you can climb out a window, Karen hissed as we walked into the hallway. All the windows on the first floor have security bars. David had them installed last year. I knew that, but I also knew something Karen did not. I ran into the powder room on the first floor and slammed the door. I locked it. Karen banged on the door immediately. I am right here. Bella, be quick. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound of my movements. I looked at the mirror. My reflection was pale, my eyes wide and dark. I looked at the window. Karen was right. There were decorative iron bars on the outside, but the powder room had a ventilation fan, an old one, and above the toilet, there was a high window that led not to the outside, but to the crawl space under the back porch. It was a quirk of the house's renovation. They had built the new deck over the old window. It was tiny, impossible for a normal adult to fit through, but I was not a normal adult. I was the daughter of a man who had starved me of affection and food for years. I was small. I climbed onto the toilet seat. I unlatched the window. It opened with a rusty squeak. Bella? Karen shouted, pounding on the door. What is that noise? Just the window, I yelled back, sticking my finger down my throat to force a loud, retching sound. I need air. I heard Karen mutter something about drama queen. I pulled myself up. My shoulders scraped against the frame. It was tight, terrifyingly tight. I wiggled my hips through, kicking my legs. I fell forward into the darkness of the crawl space. I landed hard on the dirt, scraping my hands and knees. The smell of damp earth and rot filled my nose. I scrambled toward the lattice skirting of the deck. I could see daylight filtering through the diamond-shaped holes. I kicked the lattice. It was old wood. It splintered. I crawled out from under the deck into the backyard. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my coat. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I was out, but I was not safe. I had left the will and the evidence on the desk, but I had the recording. I tapped the face of my smartwatch. The little red dot had been pulsing for the last 20 minutes. I had recorded everything. The confession, the threats, the admission of identity theft. I had them, but now I had to get to my car. No, I did not have a car. I swore under my breath. I had walked here from the bus stop after the dealership dropped me off. I had no vehicle, and then I saw it. David's sports utility vehicle. The keys were usually in the ignition. He was arrogant like that. I sprinted across the lawn toward the driveway. Behind me, I heard a window shatter. I looked back. Karen was leaning out of the broken powder room window, her face twisted in a mask of fury. She had a steak knife in her hand. She must have grabbed it from the kitchen when she realized I was taking too long. "She is escaping," Karen screamed, her voice piercing the air. "David, she is taking the truck." The front door banged open. David burst out, running down the steps. I reached the sports utility vehicle. I yanked the door open. The keys were there. "Thank you." Arrogance. I jumped in. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. David was 10 feet away. He looked demonic. I slammed the car into reverse. I did not look back. I stomped on the gas. The sports utility vehicle shot backward. Gravel sprang everywhere. I spun the wheel, swinging the front end around. I saw David diving out of the way. I saw Karen running across the lawn, waving the knife like a lunatic. I floored it. I tore down the driveway, the tires screaming as they hit the pavement of the street. I was shaking. I was crying. But I was driving. I was going to the police. And this time, I was not turning back. My hands were fused to the steering wheel of the stolen sports utility vehicle, my knuckles white peaks against the dark leather. I was driving too fast. The speedometer needle hovered near 80 miles per hour as I wove through the late-night traffic of the suburban strip. But I could not bring myself to slow down. Every set of headlights that appeared in the rearview mirror looked like a threat. Every shadow looked like my father's silhouette. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see him running behind the car like a Terminator, fueled by debt and rage. I did not go to the local precinct. That was too small, too intimate. David played golf with the lieutenant there. I drove straight to the county sheriff's headquarters, a fortress of brick and glass that promised an indifference I desperately needed. When I burst through the double doors, I must have looked like a lunatic. My coat was torn at the shoulder from the crawlspace lattice. My knees were muddied. My hair was windblown and tangled, and I smelled of damp earth and fear. "Help me," I gasped, leaning against the front desk. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with a mustache that drooped over his upper lip, looked up from his computer. He did not look alarmed. He looked bored. He scanned me from head to toe, likely cataloging me as a domestic dispute or a substance abuse case. "Name?" he asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Isabella Miller," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to report. Xiaoyu Jinghar Ling 2# is greater than I need to report identity theft and fraud. And Xiaoyu Jinghar Ling 2# is greater than an unlawful imprisonment," the sergeant said, a long, weary sound. "Ma'am, if this is a civil matter between family members, you need to file a report online. We do not dispatch for credit card disputes." "It is not a dispute." I slammed my hand on the high counter. He pulled back, surprised by the sudden violence of the movement. He held me hostage. He and his wife. They locked me in a room. They tried to force me to sign fraudulent loan documents. "They have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars in my name." I saw the skepticism in his eyes. He saw a hysterical teenage girl. He did not see a victim. He saw drama. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling 2# is greater than I have proof." I stammered. I fumbled with the clasp of my smartwatch. My fingers were trembling so badly it took me 3 tries to get it off. I tapped the screen. finding the audio file. The little waveform graphic was the only lifeline I had left. I pressed play and cranked the volume to the maximum. The tinny speaker of the watch sliced through the quiet lobby. 少于井号令. 2# is greater than you are a child. You do not own anything unless I say you own it. You are my daughter. You are my creation. Everything you have is mine. Your name, your credit, your life. It all belongs to me. The sergeant stopped typing. Then, David's voice again, clear and menacing. We need $50,000 by tomorrow noon. 少于井号令. 2# is greater than, or I pick up this phone. I call the police. 少于井号令. 2# is greater than, you go to jail. And then Karen. She is escaping. David. She is taking the truck. I hit pause. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of attention. The sergeant picked up his phone. He dialed a 3-digit extension. Detective Miller? No relation. I assume. Yeah. You need to come out to the front. I have a young woman here with a recording. It sounds like a hostage situation involving significant financial fraud. Yeah, right now, 20 minutes later, I was sitting in an interview room with Detective Miller, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense bun and a demeanor that made me feel instantly safer, and her partner. I told them everything. I told them about the credit cards. I told them about the will in the safe. I told them about the call from the jail, the bail money I still had in my pocket, and the Rolex watch incident. When I got to the part about the crawl space, Detective Miller stopped writing. You climbed through a ventilation window? She asked. I nodded. He was guarding the door. It was the only way out. She looked at her partner. That is unlawful restraint, coupled with the financial coercion. 少于井号令. 2# is greater than we have enough for a warrant, especially with the recording admitting to the identity theft. But the papers, I said, panic rising in my throat again. I left the papers on the desk. The will, the credit card statements. If he destroys them, 少于井号令, or 井号大于, he won't have time. The detective said, standing up and clipping her badge to her belt. We are moving now. The ride back to the Oaks was surreal. I was in the back of an unmarked police cruiser, watching the familiar streets blur past through tinted windows. Ahead of us, 2 marked patrol cars drove silently, their lights off, like predators stalking their prey. We pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates. The patrol cars flashed their lights once, a strobe of red and blue against the night. The gate opened. We wound through the pristine streets. It was barely 9 o'clock at night. The neighborhood was awake. Televisions flickered in living rooms. Dog walkers were out. It was a picture of suburban tranquility. Then we turned the corner onto Willow Creek Lane. The scene that greeted us was chaotic. The front door of my house was wide open. The lights were blazing. David and Karen were in the driveway. They were frantically loading suitcases into the trunk of Karen's convertible. They were running. They knew I was gone, and they knew I would not stay silent. They were trying to flee before the consequences caught up with them. Block them in. Detective Miller barked into her radio. The 2 patrol cars accelerated, their sirens finally screaming into life. The sound tore through the quiet neighborhood, shattering the peace. They slewed across the driveway, blocking the exit. I watched through the window as David froze. He was holding a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. He looked at the police cars, and for a moment, I saw him calculate. I saw him weigh the odds of running on foot. Karen screamed. It was a high, thin sound that carried over the sirens. She dropped a stack of clothes she was carrying. "Get on the ground," the officers shouted, their weapons drawn. "Police!" "Get on the ground now." David dropped the bag. He raised his hands slowly. His face was a mask of shock, as if he could not believe that the laws of physics and society actually applied to him. He knelt on the gravel, ruining the knees of his suit pants. Karen was less composed. She was sobbing, hysterical, trying to argue with the officer who was cuffing her. "It is a mistake. She is lying. She is a thief." I opened the door of the unmarked car. "Stay here, Isabella." Detective Miller warned. "I have to see," I whispered. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air was cold, but my skin felt hot. The noise had drawn a crowd. In a neighborhood like the Oaks, a police raid was better than the Super Bowl. Doors were opening all down the street. People were stepping out onto their porches, wrapping cardigans around their shoulders, holding phones up to record. I saw Mrs. Vander Woodson from across the street. She was the head of the Homeowners Association, a woman who had once fined my father for having a dandelion in the lawn. She was watching with wide, judgmental eyes. I saw the Millers, no relation, from next door. They were whispering, pointing. David was being hauled to his feet. An officer was reading him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. So Jing Hao Ling, R. Jing Hao Dayu." He looked up, then he scanned the street, desperate for an ally, desperate for someone to recognize his status. His eyes locked onto mine. I was standing by the police car, bathed in the flashing red and blue lights. I was not hiding. I was not crying. I was standing straight, my chin held high. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. He mouthed something. I could not hear it over the radio chatter and the sirens, but I knew what it was. "You traitor." I did not flinch. I stared right back at him. "No," I thought, "not a traitor, a creditor, and I am collecting." "Officer," I called out, my voice clear and carrying in the night air. The officer holding David turned. "Check the duffel bag," I shouted, pointing at the bag David had dropped. "The evidence is in the bag." Detective Miller walked over and unzipped the Louis Vuitton bag. She pulled out a thick stack of papers, the credit card statements, the will. He had tried to take them with him, to destroy them later. She looked at me and nodded. David sagged. The fight went out of him. He knew it was over. The neighbors saw it too. They saw the successful businessman being exposed as a fraud and a thief. The whispers were already starting, buzzing like locusts. "Did you hear? He stole from his daughter." I knew they were living beyond their means. Look at him. Pathetic. The public humiliation was absolute. In a community built on appearances, this was a death sentence. David Miller wasn't just going to prison. He was being erased from the social registry. He was becoming a cautionary tale. They walked him past me toward the patrol car. He tried to stop, tried to say something, but the officer shoved him forward. Karen was dragged past next. She was screaming at me, "You ungrateful brat! After everything I did for you, I was a mother to you. You were never my mother." I said calmly, "You were just another bill I had to pay." The officer shoved her into the back of the second cruiser. I watched them drive away. The sirens faded, but the lights still flashed against the trees. The neighbors were still watching me. I stood there, alone on the sidewalk in front of the massive house that was legally mine. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt overjoyed. Instead, I felt hollow. I looked at the house. The front door was still open. It looked like a gaping mouth. Detective Miller walked up to me. "We have the evidence. Isabella, we will need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal sworn statement. But for tonight, Haoling, 2 hashes greater than do you have somewhere to go? You cannot stay here. It is a crime scene until we process the safe." I nodded slowly. "I have my mom's house. Do you need a ride?" "No," I said. I looked at the sports utility vehicle parked crookedly in the street. "I have my car." I did not have my car. I had his, but as I walked toward the driver's seat, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission. I climbed into the driver's seat. I looked at the house one last time. The neighbors were starting to retreat back into their homes. Their hunger for drama sated. They would talk about this for years. They would pity me. They would judge me. Let them talk. I put the car in gear and drove away. I drove past the manicured lawns and the security gates. I drove out of the world of fake wealth and into the darkness. The public fallout had begun. The facade was shattered. But as the adrenaline faded, a new feeling began to creep in. A cold, aching loneliness. I had won the war, but looking at the empty seat beside me, I realized I had burned down the only village I had ever known to do it. The sound of a ballpoint pen scratching against cheap paper was the only noise in the small, windowless interview room. It was a dry, abrasive sound, like an insect skittering across a dead leaf. I sat across from a court-appointed advocate, a woman named Janice who smelled of peppermint tea and exhaustion. We had been sitting here for 4 hours. The adrenaline that had fueled my high-speed escape and the dramatic arrest the night before had long since evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, aching fatigue that settled deep in my marrow. "Sign here," Janice said, sliding another document toward me. "This is the affidavit of identity theft for the second credit card issuer, and this one is for the auto loan." I looked at the stack of papers. It was a mountain of bureaucracy. Each page represented a lie my father had told. Each signature I scrawled was an admission that my life, my name, and my reputation had been hijacked by the 2 people who were supposed to protect me. I signed my name, Isabella Marie Miller. The letters looked shaky, foreign. "So," I asked, my voice rasping from lack of sleep, "how much was it?" "The total?" Janice hesitated. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at her ledger. She seemed reluctant to say the number out loud, as if the sheer weight of it might crush the table between us. "Preliminary estimates, including the mortgage fraud on the house he tried to take out but failed. So Haoling, 2 hash is greater than you are looking at roughly $246,000 in fraudulent debt." $246,000. I let the number hang in the air. It was $250,000. It was a number that could buy a small house. It was a number that could pay for law school 3 times over. It was a number my father had blown on leases, watches, first-class flights, and the illusion of success. "But," Janice added quickly, seeing the color drain from my face, "since we have the confession on tape, and since he was arrested with the stolen documents, and since you were a minor when half of these accounts were opened, Haoling, 2 hash is greater than you will not have to pay it. It will take time. Your credit score is going to be frozen for 6 months to a year while we scrub it clean. It will be a headache, but you are not bankrupt. Isabella, you are free." The word tasted strange. I walked out of the station into the blinding glare of the mid-morning sun. I was free. My father was in a holding cell, likely wearing the same orange jumpsuit he had mocked only yesterday. Karen was in the women's ward. The monsters were in the dungeon, but I did not feel free. I felt flayed. I felt like someone had peeled back my skin and left my nerves exposed to the air. I drove the borrowed sports utility vehicle, which was technically evidence, but the detective had allowed me to keep it for 24 hours to move the kids back to my mother's house. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw my mother standing on the porch. She was wearing her gardening clothes, but she was not gardening. She was just standing there, staring at the street, waiting. I turned off the engine and sat in the car for a long moment. I did not want to go in. I did not want to face her. I did not want to hear "I told you so." I stepped out of the car. My legs felt heavy. My mother walked down the steps. She stopped 3 feet away from me. She looked at the bruise on my hip where I had slammed into the table. She looked at the scratches on my hands from the crawl space. She looked at my eyes, which I knew were dead and cold. I heard the news. She said softly, "Mrs. Higgins told me. The whole neighborhood knows." I nodded. I did not say anything. "Isabella," she started, reaching a hand out but stopping short of touching me. "I am so sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For hitting me? Or for being right?" "Both," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "I should not have slapped you. I was just so Ling. 2 hashes greater than I was so scared you were going to become him. I was scared you were going to drown. I did drown." "Mom," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I drowned, and then I learned how to breathe underwater. That is the difference." I walked past her, up the steps and into the house. Leo and Mia were in the living room, watching cartoons. They looked small and fragile on the big sofa. When they saw me, their faces lit up. "Bella," Leo shouted, jumping off the couch. "Did you bring Daddy?" I froze. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment where I had to kill their innocence just like mine had been killed. I knelt down on the rug. I gathered them both into my arms. They smelled of milk and cookies, a scent so pure it made my heart ache. "Daddy is not coming." "Leo," I said gently, "is he still working?" Mia asked, twisting a lock of my hair around her finger. "No, sweetie, Daddy and Karen, Ling, 2 hashes greater than they did some things that were against the rules. Big rules. So they have to stay in a timeout for a long time." "A timeout?" Leo frowned. "Like when I draw on the wall, kind of," I said, "but a lot longer." "Who is going to take care of us?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. "I am," I said fiercely, pulling them tighter. "I am going to take care of you, and Grandma Sarah is going to help us." In her own way, I packed their bags. My mother hovered in the doorway of the guest room, watching me fold their small clothes. "You can stay here," she offered. "You and the kids. We can make it work." I looked at her. I saw the hope in her eyes, the desire to fix the family she had lost years ago. But I also saw the judgment. I saw the woman who had slapped me. I saw the house where I had always felt like a guest in her perfection. "No," I said, "I cannot stay here." "Where will you go?" she asked. "Home," I said, "to my house. Grandma left it to me. It is paid for. It is mine." My mother looked shocked. She did not know about the will. "She left you the house?" she whispered. "She left me everything," I said, zipping up Leo's backpack. "And David stole it, but I got it back." I walked the kids out to the sports utility vehicle. I buckled them in. My mother stood by the driver's window. "Isabella," she said, her voice cracking, "you are only 19. You cannot raise 2 children alone in that big house." I looked at her through the open window. I put on my sunglasses to hide the hollowness in my eyes. I am not 19 anymore. Mom, I said, I think I turned 40 last night. I drove away. I did not look back. The drive to the Oaks was quiet. The neighborhood looked different in the daylight. It looked fake. The perfect lawns, the pristine fences. It was all a facade, just like my father. I pulled into the driveway of the house on Willow Creek Lane. The police tape had been removed, but a neon orange sticker remained on the front door. Evidence collected. I ushered the kids inside. The house was cold. It still smelled of stale alcohol and Karen's perfume, a ghostly reminder of the previous occupants. Why is it so quiet? Leo whispered. Because the monsters are gone. I thought, because it is ours now. I said aloud. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. I scrubbed the floors. I threw out the bottles of expensive wine. I stripped the sheets off the beds and threw them in the trash. I wanted to erase them. I wanted to scour their DNA from the surfaces. That night, after I put Leo and Mia to sleep in the master bedroom, I could not bear to put them back in the room where they had hidden in the closet. I walked downstairs to the study. The safe was still open. The desk was empty. Stripped of the evidence by the police, I sat in my father's chair. It was too big for me. The leather was cold. I looked around the room. This was my inheritance. $1 million house filled with bad memories. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing I had kept, the receipt from the bail bondsman, $4,800. I had never paid it. I still had the cash in the envelope. I had the house. I had the car, until the police seized it. But I would buy a new one with the cash. I had the kids. I had one. David was in jail. Karen was in jail. I had exposed them. I had saved myself. But as I sat there in the silence, listening to the wind rattle the window panes, I did not feel a sense of triumph. I felt a profound, aching grief. I mourned the father I wished I had. I mourned the mother I could no longer trust. I mourned the girl who used to believe that love was unconditional. I picked up the heavy Montblanc pen from the desk. I twirled it between my fingers. I was the head of the household now. I was the protector. I was the provider. And I would never, ever let anyone make me a victim again. I pulled a sheet of paper from the printer tray. I wrote 2 words on it in bold. Jagged letters. For sale. I taped it to the window facing the street. I was going to sell this house. I was going to take the money. I was going to take the kids. And we were going to start over, somewhere where the air did not smell like lies. But for tonight, I had to sleep in the house of the enemy. I turned off the lamp. The darkness rushed in, absolute and unforgiving. I sat there for a long time, eyes open, waiting for tears that refused to come. The sound of brown packing tape ripping across a cardboard box was loud in the empty living room. It was a sharp, final sound, like a zipper closing over a body bag. I smoothed the tape down with the heel of my hand, sealing away the last of the kitchen appliances. 3 months had passed since the night the blue and red lights had washed over Willow Creek Lane. 3 months of depositions, meetings with social workers, and uncomfortable silences in courtrooms. The winter had thawed into a tentative spring. The snow had melted, revealing the brown, dead grass underneath. But green shoots were finally starting to push through the soil. I stood up and wiped my dusty hands on my jeans. The house was empty. The sad clown painting was gone, sold at an estate sale, along with the leather furniture and the crystal chandelier. The house echoed now. It was no longer a home, and it was no longer a prison. It was just a structure of wood and drywall that I had successfully converted into liquidity. I walked to the front window. The red sold sign planted in the front lawn leaned slightly to the left. It had taken 6 weeks to find a buyer. A young couple from the city who saw the granite countertops and the crown molding but did not feel the ghosts lurking in the hallways. The proceeds from the sale were substantial. After paying off the mortgage fraud, liens, and the lawyers, there was enough left. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to put a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom condo in a school district where the teachers actually cared. Enough to put the rest into a trust for Leo and Mia, one that David could never touch. My phone rang. It was sitting on the floor, the only object left in the room. I looked at the screen. Unknown caller. I knew who it was. I had been expecting this call. Today was sentencing day. But he had been granted 1 phone call before being transferred to the state penitentiary. I picked up the phone. "Hello," I said. "Bella?" His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, arrogant baritone of the man who commanded waiters and terrified children was gone. In its place was a thin, reedy rasp. It sounded like a man who had spent 90 days realizing he was not the protagonist of the universe. "Hello, David," I said. I did not call him Daddy. I had not called him that since the night at the jail. They gave me 5 years. "Bella," he whispered. 5 years. Can you believe that? For a few clerical errors. For trying to take care of my family. It was breathtaking. Even now, facing half a decade behind bars, he could not admit the truth. He was still the victim. He was still the misunderstood martyr. It was not clerical errors. "David," I said, my voice calm and detached. "You stole my identity. You stole Grandma's house. You neglected your children. I did it for you," he cracked, his voice rising slightly. "I wanted you to have the best." "No," I cut him off. "You wanted you to have the best. You wanted the watch. You wanted the cars. We were just props in your play." There was a silence on the line. I could hear the background noise of the prison, the shouting of other men, the clang of metal doors. "Karen took a plea deal," he said bitterly. "She testified against me. She said I forced her to do it. Can you believe that woman? After everything I gave her, I did not answer. I did not care about Karen. She was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility. She was out of our lives. Bella, please." His voice shifted, becoming desperate and cloying. "I need you to do something for me. I know you sold the house. My lawyer told me. It was my house." I corrected him. "Fine, your house. But look, I have debts on the outside. Bad debts. People who can reach me, even in here. I need you to put some money on my commissary account. Just a few thousand. Just so I can buy protection. Please. Baby, you are my daughter. You cannot let them hurt me." I looked around the empty room. I thought about the tuition money I had lost. I thought about the nights I had spent eating instant noodles while he dined on steak. I thought about Leo hiding in the closet. I am not going to do that. "David," I said. "Bella," he cried out. "You have the money. You are rich now. You owe me. I gave you life." I walked toward the front door. My boots clicked on the hardwood floor. "You know, David," I said, "I realized something. You always said you wanted a free ride. You wanted a house you did not have to pay for, and meals served to you, and no responsibilities." "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "Well, now you have it," I said. "You have a roof over your head. You have 3 meals a day. You have free health care. You finally got what you wanted. You are taken care of. Isabella, do not you dare hang up on me. I will kill you. When I get out of here, I will come for you. I stepped out onto the porch and locked the door behind me. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfying finality. "You will not find us," I said, "and even if you do, I am not the little girl you left in the waiting room anymore." I ended the call. I did not just hang up. I blocked the number. Then I opened the settings and changed my number entirely. I walked down the steps to the driveway. My new car was waiting there. It was not a luxury sports utility vehicle. It was a safe, reliable minivan with high safety ratings and plenty of room for car seats and soccer gear. The passenger window rolled down. Mia stuck her head out. Her hair was brushed and braided. She looked healthy. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. "Are we going to get ice cream now?" she asked. I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. The first one in a long time. "Yes," I said, "we are going to get ice cream, and then we are going home." I climbed into the driver's seat. I looked in the rearview mirror. Leo was kicking his legs in his booster seat, singing a song about a shark. My mother, Sarah, was sitting in the passenger seat. She looked at me. She did not say anything, but she reached over and squeezed my hand. It was not a perfect ending. I was 19 years old and I was raising 2 children. I had lost my college fund and my innocence. I had a lot of therapy ahead of me. But as I shifted the car into drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving the empty shell of my father's ambition behind me, I realized something important. I had lost a father, but I had found myself. I drove out of the Oaks, past the security gate that could not keep out the real monsters, and merged onto the highway. The road ahead was open. The sun was shining, and for the first time in my life, the destination was entirely up to me.